The most fascinating stories in the world of rare coins, a story that takes us to the legendary 1951 wee penny, a coin that in the eyes of many collectors has become almost mythical because of the way errors, mistakes, minting anomalies, and circumstances of history have transformed what would normally be a simple 1-cent piece into something people talk about as being worth millions, and in fact, there have been claims and discussions about one particular 1951 wee penny costing an unbelievable $6 million, and while at first this number may sound absolutely outrageous, when we really take a moment to look at why such a valuation could even be considered, when we break down the possible errors that could occur during the minting process, when we analyze the production history of wee pennies, when we evaluate the numismatic environment of the early 1950s and how collectors have since come to treasure any unique era coin from that era, the picture becomes clearer, more exciting, and more compelling. And so in today's exploration I invite you to imagine what makes this humble little coin not only an artifact of monetary history but also a rare gem in the eyes of those who seek out imperfections, those who collect mistakes, and those who treasure the extraordinary when hidden in the ordinary, because the 1951 wee penny in its common form is not rare. It was minted in large numbers in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and millions upon millions were circulated into the American economy, but as is often the case with coins, it is not the typical, mass-produced example that captures headlines. It is the flawed survivor, the tiny handful of coins that slip through the cracks of quality control, the misstrikes, the doubled dies, the off-center punches, the wrong planchet strikes, the misaligned dies, the clipped planchets, the broad strikes, the repunched mintmarks, and the transitional errors that never should have existed but somehow did, and among those, the legends surrounding a 1951 wee penny that may have combined multiple such anomalies have fueled speculation that its worth is not just in the thousands or hundreds of thousands but even soaring into multi-million-dollar territory. And so let's start by considering the minting process itself, because every coin begins with a planchet, a blank piece of metal prepared to be struck by dies that hold the design of the coin, and if the wrong metal is fed into the press, you might have a copper penny design struck on a dime planchet, or a steel planchet left over from the wartime years, or an off-metal composition that was never intended to exist, and collectors know these off-metal strikes are among the rarest and most desirable errors. And then consider the dies, the steel pieces that impress the design onto the planchet. And remember that a doubled die can occur if the die itself shifts during the hubbing process, leaving letters or numbers looking doubled, like you might see in the famous 1955 doubled die cent. And when you imagine a 1951 penny with such dramatic doubling, suddenly it becomes an eye-popping anomaly that excites collectors far beyond its face value. And then think of mintmarks, because during the 1950s mintmarks were punched by hand, and that means repunched mintmarks, or RPMs, were possible, creating varieties that collectors obsess over. And in the case of the 1951 pennies, multiple RPM varieties are known, particularly from Denver and San Francisco, and yet some extreme versions could be so rare that only one or two examples exist, further heightening the mystique of this coin. And if you add in other mistakes like die cracks, die breaks, cuds, lamination errors, planchet flaws, or even experimental strikings that were never supposed to escape the mint, suddenly the 1951 wee penny ceases to be just another cent from the early 50s and transforms into a multifaceted mystery piece whose worth cannot be pinned down easily. And the psychology of collectors plays into this too, because when one unique coin becomes known, even if it is not catalogued in standard reference books, the sheer rarity of being one of a kind can drive up its perceived market value, because in the world of numismatics rarity and demand create the perfect storm for astronomical pricing. And now think of auctions, where coins with provenance, story, and buzz can command jaw-dropping hammer prices, where bidding wars are fueled not only by intrinsic rarity but also by prestige, bragging rights, and the passion to own something nobody else has. And thus the tale of a 1951 wee penny fetching $6 million is not so far-fetched if you imagine it being a perfect storm of dramatic errors, flawless preservation, and collectors willing to pay whatever it takes to secure such a trophy. And we also must remember that the 1950s were a transitional era in American coinage, not in the design of the cent itself. Since wheat pennies continued until 1958, but in the sense of minting technology, quality controls, and production standards, and so errors slip through more often than today, meaning the chances of spectacular anomalies increase, and collectors have since combed through thousands of rolls of wheat pennies searching for such treasures, finding RPMs, doubled dies, off-centers, and even off-metal strikes. But the rarest combinations remain elusive, leading to speculation that some exist locked away in private collections, waiting for rediscovery. And when such a coin emerges, like this fabled 1951 penny supposedly valued at $6 million, the numismatic world erupts with fascination, because every detail matters: the alignment of the strike, the weight of the coin, the metal composition, the sharpness of the devices, the clarity of the doubling, the uniqueness of the mintmark anomaly. And the condition itself, because condition plays an enormous role, as a mint state or uncirculated coin with errors is exponentially more valuable than a worn example, and if this particular 1951 wheat penny exists in pristine mint state, with a dazzling red luster, and combines a major doubled die averse, a dramatic off-center strike, a rare off-metal composition, and a spectacular repunched mintmark, then suddenly the story of $6 million begins to sound plausible. Because rarity stacked on rarity, error stacked on error, anomaly stacked on anomaly, creates a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of minting chaos, and collectors cherish that chaos, because it represents not only a mistake but a window into history, a moment when human oversight and mechanical imperfection conspired to create beauty. And as we think about this, it becomes clear that the 1951 wheat penny is not just about monetary value, it is about storytelling, about numismatic adventure, about the joy of searching through pocket change, about the possibility that hidden among the ordinary lies the extraordinary. And that is why videos and stories about million-dollar pennies capture so much attention, because they inspire hope, curiosity, and fascination. And beyond the errors themselves, let's also think about the mystique of dates, because 1951 as a year sits quietly in the middle of the wheat cent era, without major design changes, without being a key low mintage date. And so to have such an earth-shattering rarity tied to such an otherwise common year only enhances the drama, because nobody expects greatness in the ordinary, and that is the magic, and collectors thrive on that magic. And so when you hear of a 1951 wheat penny being worth $6 million, you realize it is not only about the physical coin but also about the dream, the chase, the lore, the possibility that you too could stumble upon one in an old coin jar, a forgotten collection, or a dusty roll of wheat cents stored away by a grandparent, and suddenly your life changes. And that possibility is what keeps the numismatic world vibrant. And so as we explore further, let's detail some of the known error types that could push a coin like this into legendary status, starting with doubled dies, where the date, lettering, or portrait shows clear doubling. And for a 1951 penny this would be monumental because such dramatic double dies are known for other years but not widely for 1951, making it a potential one-of-a-kind anomaly. And then consider off-metal errors, where the coin could have been struck on a dime planchet, weighing less than normal, or perhaps even a leftover foreign coin planchet since the mint sometimes struck coins for other countries. And such off-metal errors are some of the most valuable in numismatics. And then think of off-center strikes where the design is shifted so far that part of the planchet remains blank, creating an eye-catching visual that error collectors love. And imagine combining that with a double die, and suddenly you have something breathtaking. And now bring in mintmarks, where a repunched mintmark, struck not once, not twice, but multiple times in different positions, creates an almost surreal layering effect, and such pieces are highly sought after, and when these dramatic anomalies exist together, rarity multiplies exponentially. The 1953 wheat penny, a coin that in its ordinary circulated form might seem like just another copper cent from the early 1950s, but under the right circumstances with the right combination of minting errors, mistakes, and anomalies, it has the potential to be worth a staggering $5 million. And while this number might sound almost unbelievable at first glance, the deeper we explore the world of numismatics, the clearer it becomes that rarity, uniqueness, condition, and the drama of minting mishaps can elevate a coin from being worth just a cent to becoming a multi-million-dollar treasure. So in today's exploration, I invite you to stay with me as we unravel the story of how a simple penny struck at the Denver Mint in 1953 could capture the imagination of collectors worldwide, driving intense demand and astronomical values. And to begin this journey, let's set the stage with the basics, because the wheat cent was the standard 1-cent piece of the United States from 1909 through 1958, with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the iconic wheat ears on the reverse. And the year 1953 was no exception, with three major mints producing these coins: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with Denver marked by the D mint mark under the date, and in ordinary circumstances millions upon millions of these coins entered circulation, common enough that people would not think twice about them. But coin collecting is not about the ordinary, it is about the extraordinary, and in that extraordinary space is where the 1953 D penny earns its legend, because when you start to imagine the errors that could occur during minting, you realize how fragile and imperfect the process can be, and each one of those imperfections is a potential golden ticket for collectors. So let's walk through the types of errors that could make a 1953 D wheat penny soar to the realm of $5 million, starting with doubled dies. Because during the hubbing process, when dies are created, if there is any misalignment, the result is doubling of the design, most famously seen in the 1955 double die penny. And if a 1953 D penny bore such dramatic doubling where the date, the lettering, or even Lincoln's portrait appeared doubled and bold to the naked eye, it would instantly become a showpiece rarity. And now imagine if this double die example were also struck in pristine mint state condition, full blazing red luster, never touched by circulation, and perhaps graded by a top grading service as MS-67 or MS-68. Suddenly the rarity skyrockets. But the story does not stop there, because mint marks in the 1950s were still hand-punched onto the dies, meaning that repunched mint marks were a reality. And for 1953 D, there are indeed varieties where the D was punched more than once in slightly different positions, creating fascinating RPM varieties. But what if one exists with such an extreme repunching that the D appears doubled or tripled in bold, unmistakable form? And what if that same coin also has the double die anomaly we just imagined? Then we are now stacking one rarity on top of another, and rarity multiplies exponentially rather than additively, meaning that the market value does not just double but skyrockets, and collectors will pay fortunes for such unique combinations. And then there are off-metal strikes, one of the most exciting types of mint errors, where a coin intended to be a penny is struck on a planchet meant for a dime, or even a foreign coin blank, and such mistakes have happened throughout minting history. So picture a 1953 D wheat cent struck on a steel planchet leftover from the wartime years of 1943, or perhaps on a silver dime planchet weighing less than the usual 3.11 grams, and the coin still carrying the wheat cent design but on a wrong metal. That would instantly become one of the most valuable coins in existence. And if the coin also carried a dramatic doubling and a repunched mint mark, the numismatic world would go into a frenzy. And then we add the possibility of off-center strikes where the design is misaligned and part of the blank planchet remains exposed. Sometimes only partial portraits of Lincoln appear, and such coins are highly collectible. And if an off-center strike were combined with a dramatic doubled die and a wrong planchet strike, it would be unprecedented. A one-of-a-kind treasure that no price guide could accurately value, because the value would be determined by the collectors in fierce bidding wars at auction. And $5 million suddenly does not sound unreasonable, but perhaps even conservative. And then we have other minting mistakes like die cracks and die breaks, which result in raised lines or cuds of metal appearing on the coin, or lamination errors where the surface metal flakes or peels. And while these on their own are not usually multi-million-dollar features, if one such anomaly occurred in combination with the more spectacular doubled die and off-metal error, it would add character, uniqueness, and provenance to the coin, And all of these possibilities exist because of the manual processes still involved in 1950s minting, where human oversight and mechanical imperfections created opportunities for spectacular mistakes. And the survival of such a coin in high-grade condition is what transforms it from an error into a legend. Because millions of ordinary 1953 pennies were struck and circulated, but only a handful of extraordinary survivors could exist, and those survivors are what collectors dream about, hunt for, and pay fortunes to own. And this brings us to the psychology of collecting, because value in numismatics is not only about rarity and condition but also about desire and storytelling. And the 1953 penny tells a powerful story. A story of how something as small and ordinary as a penny could, through the accidents of minting, become something so unique that only one person on earth might own it, and that exclusivity is priceless, because when such a coin surfaces at auction, it is not just a transaction, it is an event, it is history, it is prestige, and collectors are willing to spend millions not only to own the coin but also to own the story, the bragging rights, the legacy, and the chance to pass down a one-of-a-kind artifact. And this is why numbers like $5 million enter the conversation. Because in the world of elite coin collecting, money becomes secondary to legacy, and beyond all of this we must consider the importance of grading, because professional grading services like PCGS and NGC evaluate coins on a 70-point scale, and the difference between a coin graded MS-64 and MS-67 can mean tens of thousands of dollars in value, but for rarities like this the difference can mean millions. Because a coin that is both a unique error and in superb mint state condition becomes a perfect storm of collectability. And so the 1953 penny's potential value hinges not only on the error itself but also on its preservation, and if one such coin exists in blazing red uncirculated condition, the market could easily drive its price to the $5 million mark. And let us not forget provenance, because coins that have storied ownership, coins that have passed through famous collections, or coins that have been written about in numismatic journals, all carry extra weight at auction. And that weight translates into higher bidding. So if a 1953 era penny were once owned by a legendary collector, its value would be enhanced further, and this cumulative effect of rarity, error, condition, and provenance is what propels coins into the multi-million-dollar stratosphere. And the lore of the 1953 penny is also enhanced by the fact that the Denver Mint in the 1950s was known for having some quality control inconsistencies, producing a variety of RPMs and minor errors. So the idea that a spectacular one-of-a-kind error could have slipped out is entirely plausible, and collectors thrive on plausibility, on the dream that such a coin could exist, and on the hunt to find it. And this is why videos and discussions about rare pennies worth millions capture the imagination not only of seasoned collectors but also of the general public, because who would not be excited at the possibility that a penny in their pocket change could secretly be worth more than a mansion? And that possibility fuels the excitement, the fascination, and the endless search through rolls of old wheat cents, because history has proven again and again that treasures are hiding in plain sight, that coins once thought ordinary can turn out to be extraordinary, and the 1953 penny embodies this magic, reminding us that numismatics is as much about discovery as it is about ownership. And so as we reflect on the tale of the 1953 penny worth $5 million, we realize that this coin is not just copper, not just metal, but a symbol of rarity, of imperfection turned into perfection, of history preserved in a tiny piece of currency, and of the limitless potential for the ordinary to become extraordinary. And this is why the legend endures, why collectors still search, why the value continues to climb, and why the fascination never fades, because at the end of the day the 1953 penny is more than a coin, it is a dream, and dreams, when they become real, are worth every penny and more, even $5 million or beyond. Next story of the 1946 wheat penny, a humble 1-cent coin that under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, and anomalies, can be valued at an unbelievable $5 million. And while that number sounds almost surreal, it becomes clear once we dive into the details of numismatics and understand how rarity, condition, minting mishaps, And collector demand can elevate a simple copper coin into a legendary multimillion-dollar treasure, so today's episode is all about the 1946 wheat cent, minted right after the end of World War II, a period of transition in America and in the history of coinage. And we'll explore what makes this specific year and minting so important, what types of errors could exist on a coin from 1946, and why one particular example could command the type of value that turns heads not only in the numismatic world but across the globe. Because remember, a coin's value is not just in its metal but in its story, its rarity, and its uniqueness. And the 1946 wheat penny embodies all of that in the most dramatic way. So let's begin by grounding ourselves in the context. Because the wheat penny, also known as the Lincoln cent with wheat ears on the reverse, was minted from 1909 until 1958, and by 1946 the series was already well loved by collectors, featuring the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor D. Brenner, and the reverse with the two stalks of wheat, symbolizing prosperity and growth, and in 1946 the mints at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all produced these coins, with no mint mark indicating Philadelphia, a D for Denver, and an S for San Francisco, and in ordinary circulation these coins are common, millions upon millions struck, but it is never the ordinary that captures imagination, it is the extraordinary, and the extraordinary in 1946 came from a convergence of minting errors, transitional metal planchets, and striking anomalies that created a few coins so rare and unusual that they became legends. And the first factor that adds to the intrigue is the transition from steel to copper, because in 1943 during the war pennies were struck in steel to conserve copper for wartime needs, but after the war the mint returned to using copper planchets, yet leftover steel planchets remained in the minting facilities, and in 1944, 1945, and even 1946 there are known examples of pennies mistakenly struck on steel planchets. And a 1946 steel wheat penny is already an incredible rarity. Because almost every 1946 should be copper, but imagine the discovery of a 1946 penny struck not only on a steel planchet but also bearing dramatic doubling on the obverse, such as a double die where the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait appears strongly doubled to the naked eye. This would be unprecedented, and the numismatic world would react with shock and excitement, instantly driving the value into the millions, because such a coin would not only be a transitional error but also a double die rarity. And then there's the possibility of off-metal errors, where a 1946 cent could have been struck on a silver dime planchet or on a foreign coin blank accidentally fed into the presses. And history tells us this happened with other years. So it is entirely possible that a 1946 wheat penny struck on the wrong planchet exists, and if discovered in mint state condition, such a coin could command staggering sums. And now let's imagine stacking these errors together. For example, a 1946 wheat penny struck on a silver dime planchet, off-center, and also with a repunched mint mark from the Denver or San Francisco mint. This combination of rarity would make it truly one of a kind, the type of coin that major auction houses would feature as a headline item, and collectors with deep pockets would battle fiercely to own, easily pushing the value to $5 million or more. And then we have to discuss lamination errors, die cracks, and cuds, which occur when the dies begin to break down or when the metal of the planchet separates during striking, producing dramatic raised features, missing chunks, or flaking surfaces. And while these errors on their own might not reach astronomical value, in combination with major anomalies they add to the uniqueness of the coin, further separating it from its common brethren. And the allure of the 1946 wheat penny also stems from the post-war historical context, because coins minted just after the war carry an aura of resilience, a return to normalcy, and yet the mint was still adjusting, still dealing with leftover materials, and still vulnerable to mistakes slipping through. So every 1946 era penny tells not only the story of minting mishaps but also the broader story of America in transition, and collectors cherish that. And now let's consider the importance of condition, because in the numismatic market condition is king. And coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with mint state grades above 60 commanding the highest premiums. And if a 1946-era penny of the type we're imagining surfaced in blazing red mint state condition, graded MS-67 or MS-68, it would not only be a rare error but also a stunning example of preservation. And that combination is the perfect storm that propels a coin into multi-million-dollar territory, because collectors do not just want rare. They want rare and beautiful, rare and pristine, rare and dramatic, and then we factor in provenance. Because if such a coin had been in the hands of a legendary collector, written about in coin journals, or displayed in famous exhibitions, the aura of its story would multiply its value further, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying history, legacy, and the right to say they own something no one else on earth possesses, and that sense of exclusivity is priceless. And so we return to the idea of the 1946 wheat penny being worth $5 million. Because while ordinary circulated examples might be worth only a few cents, the extraordinary ones, the ones with the wild errors, the ones with the perfect storm of anomalies and condition, those are the coins that transcend price guides, those are the coins that set records, and those are the coins that inspire treasure hunts across the country, as people search through old jars, bank rolls, and inherited collections hoping to stumble upon a life-changing find. And that is the magic of numismatics, the blending of history, art, error, rarity, and desire, and the 1946 wheat penny sits at the heart of that magic, embodying the dream that a simple coin in your pocket could be worth a fortune. And so as we close today's deep dive into the 1946 wheat penny, remember that its potential value of $5 million is not just about numbers but about everything it represents: the human element of error, the historical element of transition, the collector's passion for uniqueness, and the market's relentless pursuit of the extraordinary. And that is why this humble cent has the power to capture imaginations, inspire searches, and achieve values that most people could never associate with a penny, proving once again that in the world of rare coins the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary is thinner than we think, and one small mistake at the mint nearly 80 years ago could today be the difference between 1 cent and $5 million.